to tell a story. Yeah. It was a hard one to think of, too, because like, when I think shock, I think of a lot of really depressing things that maybe aren't going to fit into a 5-minute storyline. But I tried to think of something different, so I went with more of a visceral shock. The first thing that came to mind was my encounter with the snapping turtle that lunged at me while I was down by the river and I peed my pants a little bit. But that's not a very good story because it was actually dead. And it was just like kind of waving in the river. So I tried to think of something a little bit less embarrassing that maybe I didn't pee myself in. And I used to work down in the Italian market, which is a wonderful place to be, especially when you work there because you get, you know, like free chickens and stuff. There's this whole like inn circle. But slightly south of the Italian market, there's this like Asian poultry butcher store that has a whole bunch of different kinds of weird birds that you're not going to find in normal stores. I went in there one day because I'm a little bit of a self-proclaimed foodie, which probably a third of you about hate me now for using that word. But I was looking for quail eggs on a whim because they're really good for you and they're tiny and they're cute. And I wanted to make little sliders that had tiny little quail eggs on top. So I go into this store and I know it's there because you can smell it from 3 blocks away. As somebody who generally tries to be an ethical eater, really not the kind of store that I wanted to patronize, but I was really in the mood for quail eggs at the time. So I go in, and there's just birds everywhere and bird poop everywhere. And I go up to the guy who works there, and I'm trying to communicate that I would like quail eggs. They've got a rack that has some eggs in it. So I point at the quail, because there are live quail there, and then I point at the eggs, and I'm like, I'd like some quail eggs. Do you guys have these? And I thought I had communicated that and that he said yes. He was dealing with some other customers at the time. And he helps a couple of other people, and I'm waiting there for the quail eggs. And then he looks at me and he points at the quail, and I'm just like, yeah. And he goes over and starts snapping their necks. So I watch him murder 4 quail in front of me. And he holds them up, and he's just like, cleaned? I'm like, yes. And so he takes that quail and murders 3 other quail to go with it. And goes into the back, and I watch him drop it into a pot of boiling water. And they, clean the feathers off and reach inside and pull out the guts. And I'm sitting there going, okay. I wanted eggs, coming out with actual quail here. And comes back out with a bag full of slimy, dead, defeathered quail, which I take a little bit worried about my health there because there didn't seem to be much in the way of sanitation. And I give him $20 for these dead quail because apparently it's $5 for 4 dead quail. I thought it was going to be $5 for a dozen quail eggs. Really not up to par on my communication with poultry butchers, apparently. So I get home, and I have a bag of dead quail instead of a dozen quail eggs. Kind of changes the dinner plans there. But I'm going to try to make the best of it. So I open the bag of quail, and they did take the feathers off and supposedly remove the guts. But they've still got their heads and feet. I'm normally not very squeamish. Poultry happens to be the one thing that I do have a problem with. Like, if it's pork or beef, I can handle all the raw meat in the world. There's something really slimy and gross about birds that I don't like to begin with. Even a chicken breast can be kind of a problem. But I get my shears out, my fancy kitchen shears, because I'm going to cut these chicken heads off. And I saw my way through 4 chicken heads. Well, quail heads, yes. Cut off 4 quail heads, and I start to try to cut through them to butterfly them to open it up to cook them for dinner. And they didn't get all the guts. There's still like half torn open guts inside some of the quails. And I wave my white flag. I can't do it anymore. I don't care if it's a waste. These poor quail died in vain. They are going in the trash. I could not do it that night. Felt a little bit justified a week later when I walked by and saw the place was shut down for bird flu.